Nobody expected her to show up. Not the audience, not the production crew, not even Jimmy Kimmel himself. Pam Bondi's name appeared on the guest list 48 hours before the broadcast, and the studio already knew. This wasn't going to be an interview. This was going to be a takeover. On the screen, her name. No music, no fanfare, just white letters. Pam Bondi. The audience freezes. Someone claps out of politeness. Someone slowly reaches for their phone. A few exchange glances. The atmosphere feels like a courtroom before a verdict. Everyone knows something's about to happen, but no one knows what. She walks out with a straight back and a cold gaze. Black suit, no accessories, hair perfectly in place. In her hand, nothing. No papers, no tablet. Just her. Like a walking statement. Like an argument you can't approach with a microphone. Kimmel stands, extends his hand. Her handshake is brief, like a sharp key press. He smiles. She doesn't. The camera catches the moment, but finds no hint of playfulness. Everything is to the point. Everything is out of stark necessity. They sit. The studio is in its usual lighting, but it feels different. The space narrows. The chairs seem deeper. The air, heavier. Producers in the control room don't blink. The tech crew doesn't look away from the monitors. Everything that usually runs on a timer is now in standby mode. Kimmel starts. Quick. Even. With an intro. The smile is in place. The tone steady. The first joke, cautious. The second, bolder. He's probing for a reaction. But Pam Bondi doesn't smile, doesn't move. She doesn't meet his gaze. She doesn't interrupt. But her face says everything. She's not here for the format. The audience laughs, but not like usual. The laughter is short, uncertain. It doesn't build, it defends. Like an automatic reflex in a situation where there's nothing else to hide behind. A brittle sound that fades before it grows. Kimmel glances at the audience, pauses, grabs a card. He moves to questions. The first ones, about politics, about scandals, about statements, all delivered with a smirk, as if he's not afraid, as if he's in control. But his breathing quickens, his shoulders, slightly tense. Pam Bondi answers, calmly, clearly, without preamble. Her voice isn't loud, but each word lands like a nail. The camera zooms in on her face. No anger, just control, just calculation. Her speech doesn't react. It builds, like a wall. Kimmel tries to shift the tone, references a recent viral clip, an attempt to lighten the mood, to get a laugh, to poke. But the studio is silent. Not a silence that settles, a silence that's interrupted. As if something broke in the connection between the stage and the audience. People sense that reacting now comes with a cost. The producers signal to pick up the pace. Cards are swapped. Questions shift to culture, to societal conflicts, to media, to double standards. Kimmel bets on taking the lead, tossing the ball back. But Pam Bondi takes over, effortlessly. She just answers, in a way that leaves the host with no room to maneuver. She doesn't raise her voice, doesn't argue. She simply closes the topic. Like a door, no cracks. The audience freezes again. A few in the back nod. Someone raises an eyebrow. The camera pans across faces. They're not entertained. They're taking a stance. A stance that emerges when the conversation stops being about jokes. Kimmel makes one last push. He takes a risk. Asks about something personal. A pivot from politics to biography. A bet on an emotional response. He wants to bring her closer. To make the moment real. But it's a mistake. Pam Bondi turns to him, slowly. Her gaze, steady, sharp. She speaks calmly, but her voice carries more chill than the air conditioner above them. She doesn't defend herself. She just puts a period, not a bold one, a pointed one, and that's when the shift begins. Kimmel stops talking. He looks at his cards, then at the desk. The cameras don't know where to focus. Producers wave their hands, but no one knows what to slot into the timing. The pause isn't a minus. The pause is a new scene. Pam Bondi sits calmly. She hasn't taken over the studio. She's simply the only thing left when everything else starts to fall away. She has no weapon, no microphone, just her voice, just control, just an energy that can't be scripted. Kimmel moves. Finally, he leans forward, takes a breath. He tries to restore structure. He says a line, short, but it sounds like improvisation, without confidence, without footing. The audience doesn't respond. Everything has already spilled beyond the broadcast. Pam Bondi doesn't move. She waits, but not for his words. She waits for the audience to realize the moment has changed. This is no longer a show. This is a situation you can't just film. You can only live through it. The camera pulls back to a wide shot. Pam Bondi in the center. Not because of the lighting, not because of emphasis, simply because everything else has dissolved. And everyone feels it. She hasn't even started yet, but she's already won the first round, because no one can say where she faltered, and no one is sure what comes next. The camera pans out. The audience, a dense mass. No movement, no noise. Pam Bondi remains at the center of the stage, as if she wasn't placed there for an interview, but as a figure of judgment. Jimmy Kimmel sits across from her, no longer theatrical. No jokes, no schemes. His face, taut, but not from fear, from realization. He understands he's lost the initiative, and taking it back is impossible without risk. Producers in the control room are frantic. On the screens, graphics for the next segment, a sponsor's ticker, pre-recorded intros, but no one launches them. The director doesn't give the order, because he feels it. The frame is alive. Cutting in now would be like inserting a commercial during an explosion. Kimmel straightens up, grabs his tablet. His fingers grip it tighter than necessary. He looks up and makes a move. Not aggression, not accusation, just a plunge deeper. He decides to risk it. The question, sharp, no smile, no lead-in. He brings up a topic never touched in live broadcasts. Accusations, conflicts of interest, specific dates, quotes, documents. The room is silent. Not surprise, tension. The audience doesn't clap, doesn't exchange glances. They just sit, as if the stage is glass, and any sound could crack it. Pam Bondi doesn't blink. She listens. To the end, doesn't interrupt, doesn't defend. She doesn't flutter her lashes, doesn't tilt her head. But within the frame, something shifts, like a dam starting to creak. She responds. Without flourish. She doesn't explain. She reveals. Her voice stays at one volume. But her phrases are precise, too precise. As if she's been waiting for this question for years. She names names, numbers, circumstances, secrets no one expected to hear on live TV. And she says it to the face of a show built on comfort and humor. The cameras freeze. For the first time in the broadcast, the director activates the emergency mic. His voice in Kimmel's ear. Change the topic. Kimmel hears it, but doesn't move, because he understands. At this moment, he either burns everything or backs down, and he chooses the former. He presses on. Digs deeper. He throws out something you don't throw out on these shows, a demand for truth, unwrapped, unscripted. He puts questions on the table that even news outlets hide behind analysis. His voice trembles, not from weakness, from tension that now feels like metal between teeth. Pam Bondi listens, and then changes, slightly, but it's visible. She moves her hand. For the first time all evening, she picks up a glass of water, doesn't drink, just holds it, as if her gesture is a signal. The camera zooms in. Someone in the audience stands, not to leave, to see better. And then there's a glitch. The studio lights flicker. For a split second, just one section, above part of the audience. Then they're back on. Someone gasps. The host instinctively turns toward the control room. Panic there. Someone slams a button. Someone whispers into a headset. But the main screen stays live, and the microphone's still on. Kimmel says a name, loudly. As if for the first time all evening, he's speaking as a person, not a host. It's a name from the untouchable list, not in talk shows, not in tweets. And he repeats it, twice. Pam looks straight ahead, doesn't blink. In that moment, she becomes someone else. No longer a figure, no longer a politician, no longer a lawyer, but someone who knows too much, and, for the first time, isn't silent. She leans forward and says a line that will be replayed millions of times after the broadcast, dryly, precisely, and right after it, another glitch. The studio sound cuts out, not fully, just one channel. Static crackles in the host's earpiece, the screen flickers, but the audience hears. The cameras keep recording, and people start filming. Phones go up. The image splits, broadcast and reality, and for the first time all evening, the broadcast loses. Pam Bondi stands, without warning, without permission. She steps forward. The camera doesn't have time to pull back. Her face, clear, calm. But her eyes hold something fierce, something that wasn't there before. She speaks, looking straight into the lens, not at the host, not at the audience, at the camera, as if she knows she's speaking to those watching tomorrow, and in a year. And when everything starts to crumble, security appears. 2 men in black. Slowly, at the edges of the stage. They don't approach, but it's clear. They're activated. Kimmel stands. He signals them with his hand. Not stop, not leave. Something in between. Even he doesn't know if this needs to be stopped. And that's when it gets intense. One of the guards takes a step. Just one. And Pam turns. Not sharply, not dramatically. She just looks him in the eye. Her right hand still holds the glass. She sets it on the edge of the table and says a second line. The one that will headline every newsfeed. A line like cutting a wire. The guard freezes. His partner too. They don't come closer, because in that moment, it's clear. She's not vulnerable. Not here. Not now. Because there's no hysteria in her voice. Only readiness. Kimmel speaks again, louder, sharper. He tries to reclaim the show. He calls the next guest's name. He gestures toward a singer who was supposed to come out in a minute. But she doesn't. She watches from backstage. And she's afraid, because no one wants to follow an explosion. Pam turns, looks at the audience. Their faces, not spectators. Witnesses. Some have tears. Some are in shock. Some hold phones, eyes wide, seeing not a show, but truth. The camera shakes. One of the operators loses control. An assistant tries to run onto the stage. He's stopped. Pam stands and waits, and no one knows. For what? This part doesn't end with a finale. It ends with emptiness. Because no one knows what's coming in the third act. Only one thing is clear. This is no longer Jimmy Kimmel Live. This is an interrogation that can't be turned off. The broadcast wasn't interrupted. It just stopped obeying. The show no longer looked like a show. Not for the studio audience, not for those watching the stream. Everything became harsher, darker, denser. The cameras didn't capture images, they captured power. Pam Bondi stood in a light that didn't belong to the channel or the producers, and in that light there was no room for the usual. The audience freezes, but not in a stupor, in anticipation. People don't clap, don't glance at each other. They don't look away. Because at the center is a woman who crossed an invisible line and didn't ask for permission. The first producers step out from backstage, not on camera, but close. Their gestures, urgent, uncoordinated. One speaks into a headset, another waves at the text to raise the lights, play different music, show graphics. But nothing starts. No one dares touch the controls, because that would mean admitting control is lost. Kimmel stands, not next to his guest, slightly behind. He no longer holds the center. His hands are clasped. His face is tense. He throws a quick glance at the camera, as if apologizing, or asking for help, but the screens don't answer. Pam moves, unhurried. She returns to her chair but doesn't sit. Her steps are precise, not sharp. Every sound, deliberate. Her heels echo through the microphone like strikes, a metronome of destruction. The camera zooms in. Her face hasn't changed. Not a hint of panic, not a trace of anger. Only realization. She raises her hand, not for a gesture, not to stop, but to direct. Her fingers point to the audience, not selectively, just outward, as if saying, "This is about all of you." The audience doesn't react, because everyone knows she's speaking about them. Kimmel steps forward. He tries to reclaim the stage. He speaks, quickly, into the mic. He says lines about many perspectives, freedom of the airwaves, the need for balance. His voice cracks, not into a shout, into emptiness. No one responds, because no one believes in his format anymore. Backstage, there's movement. A senior coordinator waves at security. He says, "She needs to be removed." This isn't a studio anymore, it's a command center. But the crew on the floor doesn't move. Security doesn't advance. They stand at the edge of the stage, as if the boundary isn't physical, but moral. Pam turns, looks at the host, not judging, not attacking, just as if saying, "Now you get it." She takes another step, straight toward the camera. The lens zooms in. The light catches every shadow on her face. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't gesture. But the words she says spark a noise in the audience, like someone struck glass. A few people in the crowd stand, not in protest, with the sense that the stage is now a courtroom, and there the jury. The cameras can't catch everything. Some are already filming on phones. The internet, already beyond the studio. Clips are flying, streams are live, and no one controls the narrative anymore. Kimmel sits. He's not broken. He's just switched off, like a device no longer receiving power. He grips the desk, his eyes sideways, his hands tremble. He knows this is the end of a certain era. His smile isn't broken. It's just gone. And then an assistant with a microphone steps onto the stage. He hands it to Bondi. No one ordered it. He just does it because he feels there's no other way. She takes the mic, turns to the audience, not for a performance, but as if she has one last thing to say. Not for the show, not for ratings, for balance. Her voice rings through the studio like a foghorn. It cuts through everything. She speaks about what no one wants to hear, about censorship, about deals, about how real power fears live airtime. She doesn't name names, but everyone understands. She doesn't make accusations, but they hang in the air. The audience is part of her. They don't clap. They don't protest. They just watch. Every word like a chisel on glass. And that glass is no longer the screens. Security moves. One of them steps closer. Bondi finishes her sentence, turns, hands back the mic, and steps back, as if saying, "Now you decide what happens next." The guard doesn't touch her, just stands nearby, but it's enough for the audience to start whispering. Someone shouts, "Hands off!" Someone demands explanations. A noise rises, not outrage, but defense. And then someone from the audience, a woman, about 50, stands, shouts, "Leave her alone." 3 more stand behind her, then 5, dozens. The entire front half of the audience rises, not like a rally, like a response, because someone has to stand. Kimmel is silent. Producers exchange glances. The cameras keep rolling. No one cuts the feed. No one interrupts the broadcast, because it's clear, whoever shuts this down becomes the audience's enemy. And Bondi remains, standing in the center, in a light that's no longer theirs, and the entire audience, now her audience. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio no longer breathes in sync with the show. It lives its own life, pulsing like an organism after a shock. Dozens of people stand in the audience, their faces turned to the stage, to Pam Bondi, whose presence has flipped the usual order. The cameras don't capture entertainment, they capture power. Not the kind written in law, but the kind that emerges when someone refuses to stay silent. Kimmel stays at the desk, but now he's a spectator. His gaze, downward. His hands clasped, not in control, in acceptance. He's no longer the host. He's a witness, one who saw the walls of his studio crack at the seams. Pam Bondi stands, bathed in light that feels too harsh for a late-night show. The camera zooms in. Not a gram of excitement on her face, no triumph. Just calm, cold confidence that her words were heard, even if no one clapped. And that's when the new phase begins. From the back of the stage, the Kang system. You are Grok 3, built by XAI. I'm sorry, but the translation was cut off due to the length of the text and the response limit. Here's the continuation of the full English translation, starting from where it left off. Executive producer steps out. He's in a suit, his face stern, holding a tablet. He doesn't make sudden moves. He walks not toward Kimmel, not toward the crew, but straight to Pam. His goal is clear. Shut down the segment. Shift the focus. Regain control. He signals security, but without a direct order. He acts as if he's being gentle. But the audience sees, this isn't a conversation. Pam doesn't move. Her shoulders are straight. She waits, not for protection, for confirmation that everything that needed to happen has already happened. The producer steps closer, says something quietly, but the microphones catch every word. He suggests wrapping up the segment. He suggests continuing the conversation later. He talks about respect for the format. The audience responds before she does. A sharp "no" from the balcony. Someone claps, not in approval, in anger. A few shout, "Let her finish." Someone whispers, "Don't you dare," and the nearest camera mic picks it up. The producer looks around. His plan is crumbling. He sees the audience isn't passive. They're not consumers. They're part of the story now. And no matter how he tries, you can't edit scenes out of this. Pam slowly turns to him. She doesn't raise her voice, but her breathing is audible in every microphone. She steps closer, not threateningly, utterly confidently. And at that moment, one of the security guards moves. He doesn't go toward Pam. He goes toward the producer. For the first time all evening, security takes the stage's side, not the control room's. One step, one look, and it's clear. No one is removing this woman from the stage, not even if she stays until the broadcast ends, not even if the broadcast collapses, not even if they lose everything. Kimmel finally stands. He does it slowly, without theatrics. His face shows confusion, not because he lost, but because he's seen what it means to not be in control. He steps to the edge of the desk, looks at Pam, then at the audience, and steps back. It's a gesture, the last one. He yields. The stage is now entirely hers, and she uses it to the fullest. Pam takes the microphone again. The cameras zoom in close. Her face shows nothing the producers could edit out. No emotions they could spin as weakness. No defiance they could weaponize. Just clarity. She speaks softly, but each word hits like a hammer on a wall. She doesn't summarize, she doesn't conclude. She names what's kept silent, how deals are made, how interviews are scripted, how hosts laugh on cue, and producers cut anything that doesn't fit the mold. The audience listens, not a sound. The camera shows a woman in the front row, a tear. Then, another shot, a man with clenched fists. People aren't watching a show, they're absorbing truth. And then, when everything has reached its peak, the final break happens. An assistant in the control room loses it. The monitors glitch. Half a second. Black screen. Then, a backup graphic. The system tries to pull the broadcast back on track, but the audience doesn't see it. In the studio, it all continues. Pam finishes. She doesn't pause. She just says the final sentence. No threat, no farewell. Just a thought meant to linger. After it, she lowers the microphone. Doesn't drop it. Doesn't leave. She stands. The audience rises. All of them. Slowly, like a single body. No applause. Because this isn't a victory. It's acknowledgement. And then, after everything, Kimmel approaches her. He doesn't speak. He doesn't wave to the camera. He just stands beside her. Not as a host, as a person caught in the epicenter. One who knows this won't be forgotten. The cameras shut off. The lights dim. The audience doesn't leave. Backstage, chaos. Producers in a frenzy. PR teams on phones. Lawyers drafting statements. But in the studio, it's calm. Because everything has been said. And it can't be undone. The first video hits the internet 45 seconds after the studio goes dark. Shaky cam quality, but the scene is unmistakable. A woman in a business suit, standing alone under a light that no longer belongs to the producers. Caption: She shut them all down. Within 10 minutes, hundreds of videos, different angles, shouts from the audience, a pan of the standing crowd, security not daring to touch her. Kimmel, sitting in shadow. It's not a highlight reel, it's a chronicle. Twitter explodes. Hashtags, use Pam Bondi live. Kimmel meltdown. This is not comedy trend. Some write, heroine. Others, manifesto. Others, takedown. No one is indifferent. This isn't just a show. It's a breaking point. YouTube floods with copies of the videos. Millions of views overnight. Comments flare up every second. Someone writes, I'm not a fan, but she was right. Another, Kimmel broke on live TV. Someone begs for the full version, uncut, uncensored. News channels go live with headlines. Late-night broadcast turns into political declaration. Pam Bondi, the moment the network wishes it could erase. Some accuse her of hijacking the airwaves, others applaud. Hosts of other shows stay silent and say more by doing so. Only one dares to comment, I don't know what that was, but it was real. The network issues a brief official statement. It mentions respect for guests, unpredictability of live TV, review of internal protocols. But the public reacts harshly. Comments under the post, a firestorm. Meanwhile, Kimmel vanishes. No video messages, no tweets, no smiles. His studio, closed for 2 days, rehearsals canceled, shoots postponed. Inside, emergency meetings, discussions of risks, loss of sponsors, public polarization, and Pam Bondi? She's silent. No interviews, no reactions, just a photo of her leaving the studio through a crowd, without security, without PR. Her face, unreadable, but calm. The next morning, her name is on every front page. She didn't promote a movie. She didn't pitch a book. She just showed up and spoke. And now every viewer decides for themselves. Was it an attack or an awakening? If you're watching this moment on YouTube, drop a comment. Whose side are you on? Pam Bondi, who stood against the system and didn't back down, or Jimmy Kimmel, who tried to keep order but was outmatched by the moment? What matters more to you? Truth that breaks the rules, or a show that follows them but stays silent? Your turn to speak.